Matt here from The Random Maker, and today we're going to be working on a project that has been a long time in the making.
Monkey Studios, as you can see, under renovations. Hopefully we can close that up soon.
We can actually see when the original short came out to advertise this project, which didn't work out the way we thought. What we're going to do today is show you how to make your very own knife without a whole lot of tools. Do us a favor, if you want to see more of this, hit the like, subscribe button. But other than that, let's move on.
First thing I'm going to do is just cut out our template.
Now make sure you're careful with this because the closer the template is, this can kind of be your final. Now I'm going to lay the template out on some 1080 steel. The 1080 is just, it's a good beginner steel for knife making. I haven't done this in a long time, so I wanted something easier to work with. As you can see, just tracing around, make sure you make that line thick because I tend to use that thickness of a marker to be like my sanding and uh-oh room, so that it looks a little nicer. And when I say uh-oh room, I don't mean it that way, but it just gives you a little bit of a buffer zone for any mistakes.
Okay, at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, you have your template on the metal sitting here, and it's a piece of metal. Now we need to start actually turning it into something awesome, or a knife. So one thing you're going to see here is I'm going to be moving the metal with the cut to make it work. So make sure your blade is nice and tight, and let's just get hacking away. Now we can actually see what's going on here. This project has been a rush to world. So now I'm on a mission to finish it for our 100th video. So I'm going to use the grinder now. Now, you could continue with the hacksaw and file, but I want to get this knife done. It's already gone longer than I humanly should have, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. So yeah, we're going to do that.
Just a reminder, make sure you use all your safety grinders.
With metal drilling, you always want to punch holes first. Now we're going to drill these in using this little mini drill press. It's small, but guess what? It works. So always make sure the metal's going to be on the other side because the drill spins that way. So if my C-clamp that I'm using to hold the metal will let go, it's going to send the knife into the wall, not into me. That's important. So yeah, enjoy.
Really simple metal drilling, clamp down. As you can see, what I'm doing is just running that marker right down the middle. I kind of eyeballed it because it doesn't matter too much at this stage. I'll pull out more measuring devices later, but for now that just gives me a rough idea for the next part of the project. Now what I'm doing at this stage is I'm just draw filing a rough profile. Now, as I said earlier, I put that marker in the middle, roughly speaking, and that gave me a rough idea of where the middle is. Now I'm only going to file up until there, and then I'm going to use rulers to get the dead middle later. And if you're wondering why I didn't do it now, it's with sanding and filing, you always take stuff out. So at this stage, I just use rough marker lines because eventually I'll get rid of it. So yeah, that's about it. And I do both sides. And for the keen eye observers, you notice there's no drill holes. I changed the order a little in post-production because it made more sense. What I'm doing here is I'm just using a small drill bit from the holes, and I put a mark onto the handle material, and then I clamp the two handle materials together. The outside, the side that's not going to be seen, so if I mark it, no big deal. And I'm drilling through both of them. And what that does is it gives 3 sets of holes that all line up perfectly, and that's incredibly important. What I'm doing here is cutting out the brass pins we're going to be using. Pretty simple, hacksaw, brass. That's about it. Okay, I tried many different tools. I've never done a carbon fiber handle before, but what I found worked in the end was just a good old hacksaw, and then sanding all the pieces to shape using the grinder, as we can see here. Make sure you're wearing full ventilation and mask. You don't want to be breathing this stuff in, so yeah, just make sure you check your SDSs. So what I'm doing here is I didn't get footage of me marking the center, but I marked the center, and now as you can see, I'm looking down the line to make sure I'm not taking too much off on one side, and I'm flipping it back and forth and giving it that rough profile edge. So at this point, I'm just giving it a quick sand because we're going to be sending it off for heat treating, and this is where we don't want any nicks.
The last clips were me sanding the knife. We actually sent it out. We have the knife now, but the thing is, I was thinking of maybe doing the tempering on camera and all that, but the more I thought about it, it's not the greatest idea. The reason I say that is, number one, the equipment to heat temper properly is incredibly expensive. If you want a really nice knife that's going to last you for a long time, hire it out. In my mind, shipping it out here and there for really fine-tuned specific processes when you're building something is worth it. When you're hiring somebody, you're not hiring for the cost of tools and materials, you're hiring them for their expertise. And that's the key. So I hired this one out. You can use an oven, bad idea. You can use a torch and do it if you get the color right. That takes a lot of experience. I wouldn't recommend it if you're new. Heat treatment is one of the most finicky part of making a knife. So if you're new and only doing this once or twice, yeah, hire out. If you're gonna make this into a hobby, learning the colors and how to pull it out at different tempers, and you have to look at the steel.
At this point, you can see I'm taking a file and I'm just getting the shape I want with the handle, make sure it fits in my hand. I also made sure the brass pins were exactly the right size at this point because I don't want to be filing them or sanding them with the material. I then took a grinder and basically did the smoothing with this. As you can see, I'm kind of experimenting at this stage, but it worked really well. Use the file to get a lot of the rough shape and then take a sander and do the final pieces. I'm using a Dremel, but you can use almost anything there.
We are now ready to get this knife all prettied and shiny. As we can see, it's kind of like bluish color. That's from the tempering process. It has gone through heat treating and tempering, and it is not like one and done. Basically, you do it in stages, and so this knife, as we can see by the bluish color, there's no flakes on it. It's been done right. So one of the things though is I did leave this a little thicker than a knife. Like right now, it's actually dull. Reason for that is if you put this too thin, what can happen is the blade will start to go out and curve and all that. Unfortunately, because it's thicker now, we're gonna sand it. Now, one of the things is I'm gonna hand sand. I do not want any process that I'll put more heat on this, or else it might lose some of the tempering we just did. So enjoy watching me sand.
All right, this was just not a fun. It's just a lot of sanding and making it as shiny as humanly possible. This is like your final sand. We're gonna polish, but that's about it. I then take the handle pins and put it all together. And basically this is the final handle shaping before we epoxy everything together. So I am making sure everything is good and exactly the way I want it, because once the epoxy is there, I'm going to put it quite thick, so I'm not going to be able to have access to this metal again. So this is the final shaping, and I'll do a quick sand with the handle just like I did. All right, so I gave everything a quick coating and cleaning of rubbing alcohol and let it dry. It's just a way to get everything spotless for the epoxy.
I've let the rubbing alcohol dry. I've cleaned these up a little better because remember, we are going to be pouring on to put epoxy, and anything left on there ain't going to be accessible after. So I cleaned up the sides, cleaned up the knife to look good. I'm not too worried about the metal because we're going to be shining it, polishing it, making it look pretty, but yeah, let's get going.
So this process I haven't done in a long time, so I kind of made a couple mistakes, but I kind of fixed it in the end. Now what I did do is, as you can see, I have the pins in, and I leave it crack open because I want to be able to just squish it all together later with the vise. I have some pieces of wood so that I don't scratch anything. I also am going to put the epoxy around the carbon fiber, so it's a little bit of a different process but you can see here I am just pushing the epoxy in. Now I'm going to load it up quite thick because once I squish it through, I'm going to watch and make sure there's a ring around to make sure it is completely adhered into the process. Now I'm just pushing the knife together to get as much as possible in there. And now you can see I've taken 2 wooden blocks and I've just started squeezing the knife together. Sorry, I got in the way. I'm great at camera sometimes, and with the epoxy drying, because it is quick set stuff, only 20 minutes until it sets, I didn't really have time to reset, and yeah, it was wonderful. So we just pressed it all together, and that was about it. Okay, so I didn't really like how uneven it was. I didn't do the greatest job the first round, so I took a sandpaper and sanded it all off. Now keep in mind the knife's still together, and there is some epoxy still on there, but I wanted an epoxy handle. So what I did is I made a very thicker batch of the epoxy, and I covered the blade in painter's tape so that I don't get any epoxy on it, and I just spread it around. And then I did take, I don't have film of it, a mini little torch and torched it on. This will get rid of any bubbles. It also really helps with leveling if you do a thicker coat. And yeah, that was how I got a smear finish on my knife. At this point, all I started to do was, at first, what I did was what's called water polishing, where I just got wet dry sandpaper and started polishing and sanding the knife handle with water, and eventually I switched over to a oil, and that's how I got the final shine. As you can see here, I'm just using water, and what that does is it just allows me to see any nicks. Also, it starts to polish it. As you can see, I also have the blade still wrapped up in painter's tape, because what I did after I got the handle all polished up is I used oil and gave it an oil polish, as I didn't want water actually on any of the metal blade. And yeah, that's about it, and let's see the finished result.
That's it. What we have here is an amazing knife. Well, if you like this video, you know the drill. If you can subscribe to us, it helps us out. Hit the like button below. If you have any projects you want to see any of the random makers take on, put it in the comments below. We're always up for a challenge. Until next time, let's get making.